Alrighty, welcome. We are gonna get started. If you haven't met me before, hello, my name's Cam Bernard. I'm product director for VertiGIS Studio based here in Victoria, British Columbia. The last 2 months feels like it has flown by, and we have a whole bunch of really interesting stuff to talk about and to show you today. So with no further ado, let's get started. Started off just with some miscellaneous things. These came out of all kinds of places, including some great conversations in some of our regional user groups. We're excited to be back out talking with customers face to face. Feels so good. And these are some things that we thought were important for you to know about. So let's kick it off with ArcGIS Enterprise 11.1 compatibility. I know some of you have been asking about this on the community and other places. So we have completed our compatibility testing. You can see on the left there a list of the products that we tested with and that are compatible with ArcGIS Enterprise 11.1. There are 2 caveats this time around. This doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. It's why we test stuff for you. The first is around access control. When we did our testing, there was no version of access control that was compatible with ArcGIS Enterprise 11.1. They made some changes that broke some things. Since then, we have released VertiGIS Studio Access Control version 5.6. The caveat here for you is if you're looking to upgrade to ArcGIS Enterprise 11.1 and you are a user of access control, you must upgrade to version 5.6 or it will break and you will not be happy. The second caveat is to do with something called web adapter extensions. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you're totally safe. If you do know what I'm talking about, it is because you are deployed on-prem with either GeoCortex Essentials, VertiGIS Studio Workflow, VertiGIS Studio Printing, or VertiGIS Studio Reporting. You have integrated Windows authentication enabled in your IIS, and you have anonymous access disabled. It's a very specific security configuration that a few customers do use. And in those cases, we had provided a little utility that allowed server-to-server communication through integrated Windows authentication. This does not work with ArcGIS Enterprise 11.1. We are working on a solution for you, and if you keep your eyes peeled, I suspect you'll see something as early as next week from us. If you want more information about any of this stuff, there is an article on the Support Center. All right, speaking of the Support Center, let's talk about our Support Center and community. If you've been there in the last short little while, you may have noticed that we've moved. We used to be located at community.vertigis.com. We are now located at support.vertigis.com. Same platform behind the scenes, all the same articles are there, same forums are there, all the existing content is migrated over. The difference for you is that this is now alongside all of our other VertiGIS product lines. We've also migrated all the followed community topics. So if you've previously been following announcements, for example, so that you get notifications when we release new versions of software, that's all still set up for you. It is also the same support ticketing system. So the only difference there is when you first create a ticket now, you're going to pre-select a product family. Just use VertiGIS Studio for both VertiGIS Studio and for GeoCortex. And in the near future, maybe the next month or so, we're actually going to also have all your software downloads hosted for you on support.vertigis.com. Hopefully, when you're looking for installers, you're going to apps.vertigisstudio.com/downloads. That will redirect you to the right location always. Currently, that is a third-party product that we've been using as we were getting this set up, but very soon you will do that directly on support. Now, I wanted to show you this because I was looking for it the other day. This is the new Support Center, and one quick little tip is use the filters. So let me show you what I'm looking for. Let's say we were looking for something about the layer list. When you search for that, there's quite a lot of stuff in this new support community. If you go from all sources down to VertiGIS support and then down to community, you will very quickly be able to begin to filter things down to say web, or maybe you're even looking specifically for ideas about web. And that will help you find what you're looking for a whole lot faster. Services and managed services offerings. This came up through conversation with you as our customers in regional user groups. And what we discovered was a lot of you really didn't know too much about the services that we offered and the managed services that we could provide. So I'm not going to read out this slide. It is here for you to look at. But what I do want to emphasize is just whether it's a one-time thing that you need a hand with, maybe it's some consulting about a future upgrade or ongoing maintenance, you don't have the resources and you need a partner who's going to come in and actually help you manage your own infrastructure, for example, we do have a service model that will support you. So by all means, if something I've just said is like, oh, hey, I want to know more, contact your account manager. We've got a little one-pager that we can provide you that shows you all about this information. Now, if you're still planning your move to VertiGIS Studio, maybe you've already begun and you've moved a few apps over, maybe you're just at the point now where you're like, okay, we're ready, we're gonna do this thing. There is a process going on right now. We're gathering and organizing all the available information. We've shared lots of stuff with you in the past and kind of consolidating that all into a playbook resource, as well as an upcoming webinar. So there is a webinar coming on June the 27th. If this is something that you're still in the process of thinking about, I would highly recommend that you register, check out the webinar live, get a copy of the playbook so that you have access to this fantastic information. The Esri User Conference is coming up fast, not that many weeks away now. Look for us there. If you're going to be there, we have a VertiGIS booth and we're going to be showcasing VertiGIS Studio, which you are very familiar with, alongside VertiGIS FM and VertiGIS Networks. And if you were watching the news a few weeks back, you may have actually noticed that we've been talking about VertiGIS Networks in the North American utilities market. And for that, I thought it would be fantastic to have a special guest walk us through some of the information that we've been showing as we've shown this in our regional user group. Now, Drew, it's a little hard to call you a guest. I think you probably ran this webinar longer historically than I ever have, but welcome. And let me just give you permission.
Yeah.
So you can share your screen.
Great to be here. Happy to be a guest today. I think it's your webinar now, Cam. So you can call me a guest. That's fine. It has been a long time, but it's good to be back. Yeah, let me just share my screen and I'll share a few slides with you. And I'd love to also give you a demonstration of VertiGIS Networks. As Cam mentioned, we've spent some time working on VertiGIS Networks and we're launching that product in North America, starting with this press release, but also with customer engagements, partner engagements as well. So better to tell you a little bit about it today. And if you want to learn more, I'll also leave you with some resources. So first, some context. VertiGIS Networks is just one of several product lines that we work on at VertiGIS, like VertiGIS Studio is. You're most familiar with GeoCortex, aka VertiGIS Studio, but for your information, we have several product lines that we're investing in across several industry verticals, and VertiGIS Networks is one of them. If you were at a Road Ahead webinar 2 months ago, Cam provided a quick showcase of the VertiGIS FM product, and so you can expect to see a little bit more from us about the other product lines where we're making investments. And similarly, when you go to that support center, as Cam mentioned, you'll now see the other product lines that we're supporting customers with globally with these products. But today we wanted to focus on VertiGIS Networks, and as its name suggests, it's a network management product for utilities and telecommunication providers. For VertiGIS Networks, we of course use ArcGIS as a foundational layer, and in this circumstance, we're using ArcGIS Enterprise and the utility network in order to facilitate sort of that base layer of foundation that gives you a place to store your network infrastructure data, your physical network infrastructure, and then VertiGIS Networks is providing solutions on top of that data in order to enable network providers across a number of different use cases. Still, VertiGIS Studio is part of this technology stack as well. So the good news is if you're a VertiGIS Studio customer familiar with that, then you're already quite familiar with the architecture of VertiGIS Networks because it's built on top of VertiGIS Studio. For VertiGIS Networks customers, this means that they get a really rich configuration framework that we know and love from VertiGIS Studio in order to further enrich the applications, further configure the applications that we're delivering within networks. So what is VertiGIS Networks? In a nutshell, it's 6 focused solutions that solve the specific use case that network providers have across the entire asset management lifecycle. When I say asset management lifecycle, we mean planning a new network subdivision at the beginning of the lifecycle, or just planning a small network extension like a new house connection, to the design and construction ready plans, to the actual installation in the field and then recording the as-built infrastructure, and then to the ongoing maintenance that happens on your network. There's an entire life cycle across these assets, and there's use cases that we need in order to support all of the stages of that life cycle. These products are engineered around those use cases for editing, exploring, planning and simulating, locating your network, dealing with outages, and of course, performing maintenance. There's those solutions, again, there's 6 of them, and slicing across those solutions. So if you think of the solutions as the clients or the applications that you're using, horizontally sliced across them on this diagram, you see the domain packages, and these are specializing those solutions for the specific type of network that you're operating. So in the case of a water network, we want to do things like valve isolation traces. And in the case of a telecommunications network, we might want to do a fiber strand trace. They're both trace operations. They're both things that we would do in our Network Explorer product, but they're specialized for the network domain type. Today, I just want to give you a quick preview of 2 of these products, the VertiGIS Network Explorer and the VertiGIS Network Editor. The Explorer is really about asking questions about your network. So once you've got your data loaded into Esri's utility network, you might want to analyze that data. You might want to perform trace operations, interrogate attributes, look at charts and dashboards, share that information with executives or other stakeholders in your organization or even the public. That's what Network Explorer is really about for end users who just want better understanding of their network operations. And then Network Editor is the construction and documentation tool. So here's where you can record and update your system of record regarding your network in a web browser. A lot of our organizations implementing utility network are relying on ArcGIS Pro to do the basic editing of their network, and we believe that a lot of that, if not all of that, can be done in a web browser. So our vision and strategy is really around a web-centric approach to delivering very robust functionality that utility network providers need. So let me give you a quick preview into those 2 products, and then again, I'll leave you with some materials where you can learn some more. So let's start with the Network Explorer, and this is a demonstration site that we've put together containing network data across a number of different domains, actually. So in a single map, we're actually looking at network data belonging to water, gas, and electric network infrastructure. So if I just want to see one of those at a time, I can click on the electric network or the gas network or the water network, and you can see we're toggling multiple layers of visibility at the same time. And for this demonstration, I'm just going to focus our use cases on the water network. Now, you're going to see some familiar tools that you would expect to see in VertiGIS Studio web type applications here, but we're using these tools to organize the data and make information available about our network. So for example, just some basic selection tools. If I draw a line and then buffer that line, I might be interested in the specific assets, the network assets that were within that buffered area. Here we can see water features that are junctions, lines, and devices. And of course, we can switch that into a tabular view as well so that we can look at those on a layer by layer basis. So if I'm just particularly interested in the water devices on this line, for example. So that's one way of understanding your data from a tabular perspective, or clicking on an individual feature to get all of its attribute information. But sometimes it's also interesting to summarize this information in a chart or a series of charts for executive reporting or for status updates. We know that with water networks, a lot of organizations are replacing infrastructure. Some of that infrastructure is built with older material like cast iron that needs to be replaced. And so getting a summary view of how much of that material is already replaced and how much of that is needing to be replaced. We can also summarize, for example, the water line diameter here and see what type of infrastructure we have in the selected area. Of course, this is just using this highlighted area as an example. Some of our customers are operating their GIS in both 2 dimensions and 3 dimensions. And so it's important in an application like this to be able to switch between 2D and 3D. So in that circumstance, we have a toggle here that allows you to switch from the 2D map to the 3D scene, of course, preserving the same infrastructure, the information that you have about your network, but now rotating that map in 3 dimensions. We can start to understand the actual house connections, what buildings they're connected to, or if you have subsurface infrastructure, perhaps it's interesting to know the depth of that infrastructure in your 3D scene. Another way of visualizing your network alongside a map, whether it be a 2D map or a 3D scene, is inside of what we call a schematic or a diagram. So if I go to this Analyze tab, we have the ability to look up diagrams that we've pre-configured against our network. I'll choose the utility network that I'm interested in connecting to, and then choose the water distribution subnetwork diagram. This is a diagram that can be configured in Pro, ArcGIS Pro that is, and we feed it the utility network. This is the connected network of all of our assets, and it automatically generates a schematic diagram for us. In this case, we can then further tailor that diagram with symbology and other settings so that we can control how it's displayed. And the diagram control that you can see here is manipulated in the very same way that I would manipulate a map. So I can drag and pan, I can zoom with my mouse wheel, and it's also interactive. So if I, for example, click on this water pump feature, it's going to send a message to the map to highlight that water pump on the map. Correspondingly, I can do that with line features like this line here. I can see that that's a hydrant service line. That must mean that this here is a hydrant. So you can see the bidirectional relationship between our schematic model and our physical model on the ground. Now, sometimes we need more real estate to look at these things. So any one of these panels, be it the table, be it the map, be it this diagram, can be popped out into a separate browser window and then docked onto a separate monitor. It's difficult for me to show you that because I'm only sharing one screen right now, but hopefully you get the idea. When it comes to analysis of your network, we also want to be able to perform trace operations. This can be useful for use cases like understanding where to turn off valves in the case of a waterline break or planned service interruption, or a boil water advisory. If we found out that there's a bacterial infection in one part of the network, we need to notify our customers of this location. Let's trace the network and find out who might be affected by this. So let me just give you an example of the trace operations that are possible here. When I click on trace, we organize a dialog split into 3 sections. You can choose the starting points of your trace operation, the barriers that you might want to put in, blocks, and the trace function itself. So when I choose the starting point, I just need to click on the map, and you'll notice that I can roughly approximate a feature. I don't have to click exactly on this distribution line, pixel perfect precision. I can click nearby and it automatically snaps to the nearest feature. So we're going to run a trace from this water distribution line. I won't set up any barriers right now. And it's just showing me all of the different pre-configured trace configurations that I can run. This list can be quite long depending on what you've configured in your application. So you might want to filter it down. For example, I just want to show the isolation traces, and I just want to show the isolation traces that are appropriate for my water network. And now I can, for example, see the next valves that are associated with this particular distribution line. These are the 2 valves that I might need to shut off, and they're highlighted on the map and also shown to me in this tabular control. But using the same inputs, I can automatically run another trace like the affected service connections. And in this case, we're getting a list of all of the service connections or otherwise the owners of the water network, the customers of this water network that would be affected if I needed to do an operation on this distribution line. We have a tabular report here, and of course I can export these results, but we can also pre-configure reports that are appropriate, like mailing label reports or other reports that are necessary in order to start the notification process for our customers that we're going to be performing maintenance in this area, or as the case may be, a boil water advisory or what have you. This, of course, is integrating with VertiGIS Studio reporting. We're just populating it with the utility network specific data, the attributes and features that we've selected as a result of this trace operation. Coordinating these activities, like the trace that I've run, generating the table and ultimately generating this trace report, can also be done through workflows. I'm just showing you some of the out-of-the-box functionality that performs these operations. So there's our resulting report. We can see all of the addresses and the devices that are resulting from that trace. So that's just a quick preview of the VertiGIS Network Explorer. That's available inside the VertiGIS Networks product suite. I've shown it here on a water network, but available for electric, gas, and telco as well. Let's move over to a companion product called the Network Editor. So I did that quickly. I just switched tabs. It looks similar, but this is a different product. This now is called VertiGIS Network Editor. Like Explorer, it's built using VertiGIS Studio Web, but in this case, it targets the editing use case. So we're going to want to edit our network and update the system of record. When we're editing, it's a little bit reckless to edit the default data that is the digital twin of our network. So typically, we're going to go in to create a version first. So as a user who has the permissions to edit this network, I can create a new version, and I'll just call it Road Ahead. Give it a description as well. I can also choose the permission. So if I'm the only editor, I might choose that this is a private version, or I can make it public for anyone in my organization. And then I'll choose this checkbox to switch to the version. That means first, I'm creating the version in the geodatabase. Second, I'm actually switching the context of my application, so all of my edits are performed against this version. And I can always check which version is active right now. Down at the bottom of this versions tab, it can show you that the Road Ahead version is the one I'm editing. Now I feel safe that I can go ahead and make some edits to this network. The default way to make an edit, you just click on a feature on the map, look at the attributes, and then click edit. When I click edit, it turns it into edit mode, and I can update any of the attribute values of this, in this case, distribution line, for example. I can also edit its geometry on the map by just dragging vertexes, creating new vertexes, etc., and then clicking save. Now that, again, even though this is version data, was a bit of a reckless edit. Typically, when we're editing our network, we're not just dragging geometries around on the map. We're probably doing construction geometry and using survey points and things like that. So we've built some construction tools exactly for that purpose. Just to highlight, however, I wanted to point out that what we call a dirty area was created. So the system is recognizing that an edit happened in this area, and this is dirty because we're not sure if the edit that I just created is still valid network topology. There are network topology rules that we may need to run against this in order to validate it before we agree that this is a valid network edit. So that dirty area has been recorded. Now when I go into the edit tab, I can use some of those more construction-oriented editing tools. First of all, we have the ability to import CSV points that may come from survey equipment. I won't do that right now, but we can also, for example, add points that are perpendicular or exactly parallel to existing features. You can see that these service connections are exactly perpendicular to this line, for example. So if I create that line, and then I say 35 yards down the line and minus 12 yards from that is a survey point or a construction point that I want to add to the map, what I'm doing is I'm just creating a snappable object. What I mean by snappable is that when I go in and start to digitize my edits, all of my edits are going to be able to snap to that feature, and I can know for certain that it's exactly the measure that I want to be able to place on this map. Now when I go in to create my feature, I'm going to see a list of feature templates that are available to me. You can see feature templates for my electric data, my gas data, my water data, and each of those, there's dozens of different feature templates. So this list can be a little bit overwhelming sometimes. Therefore, it's important to be able to filter it down. I can filter it by starting to type. I just want hydrant lines, service lines, distribution lines, and transmission lines from my water network. I also need some fitting elements. So let's get a saddle and a T. And you can see when I click these star features, they're actually being added to a list of favorites that I'm collecting here. So as a user, I can come in, have access to my favorites. My favorites are the things that I typically edit most frequently, or at least I'm going to be doing those routinely in a particular edit session. But my favorite part of this is what we call smart editing. Smart editing allows me to select a feature on the map, like this distribution line, and it will show me all of the compatible templates. The compatible templates are ones that the utility network rules say, hey, these are actually templates that you're allowed to attach to distribution lines. So for example, I can attach a saddle to this distribution line, and it's going to allow me to snap it, only because it's a compatible feature template. Once I save the attributes for this, I've created a new saddle feature here, and it knows the next thing I might want to do is add one of these water lines. In this case, let's create a service line, snap it here, and go ahead and snap it to our construction point we created earlier. Once I've created my service line, again, the list of compatible templates is updated to show me, well, these are the types of things that you might want to connect to it. So in this case, let's go ahead and create a fire hydrant service line. Once I'm satisfied with my edits, I go into the Validate tab, check my network topology. I can look at the entire extent or the entire map, verify that all my edits are compatible with the utility network, and once they are, I would come back to my versions tab and reconcile or post my edits into the default version. I won't do that now to disrupt the default version, but you get the general idea. So much for a super flash quick demo of the Explorer and the Editor, part of the VertiGIS Networks product suite. Hopefully you see some familiarity there with VertiGIS Studio. And just to highlight, when you bring VertiGIS Networks to your use cases as a network provider, because Studio is used to build it, you can go in and configure those applications exactly the same way you would configure a VertiGIS Studio web app. So add your own workflows, add your own reports, add your own print templates, use the design tools. That's a really key value proposition that we're adding for customers that are trying to manage their networks. I mentioned I'd leave you with some takeaways. So if you want to learn more, we've been towards the end of the month. It's on June 22nd, exactly at this time as well, 10 a.m. Pacific. Please join us. We're going to focus on water. We're going to be looking at boil water advisory use cases, valve isolation trace use cases, and the other things that are really important in that sector. Hope to see you there. So thanks for the segment, Cam. Back.
All right. Fantastic. Thanks, Drew. Much appreciate the time. I'm going to reshare my screen. Here we go. Yeah, I should be able to see my smiling face. Now, if you've not heard me present before,
you look great.
You may be asking yourself, how many cups of coffee has this guy had today? The answer is not that many. I just really enjoy presenting information. You can see the technology update and road ahead segment, I trust. And away we go. All right, so this is somewhat the more traditional part of our road ahead, where we walk through some of the things that have recently come out in VertiGIS Studio, some things we're finalizing right now today, and some things we have planned for the future. So let's kick it off with some recent released things. First up, you've already heard about this, Access Control 5.6, released May 15th. This was largely about ensuring that we had a product that was compatible with ArcGIS Enterprise 11.1. Also, not that long ago, May 1st, was inline version 2.4. Now, of course, with all these products, by all means, please go read the release notes. There's all kinds of enhancements, bug fixes, features in these. I'm really just calling out the highest level piece. But we had several customers who were interested in using the dynamic inline view together with both a 2D and a 3D view and having them all synchronized and highlight at the same time. We've released that. That is now available. Mobile 5.23 came out April the 19th. We introduced you, actually, I think you'd already seen the V2 app selector at this point, but improved it. We've been working iteratively with your feedback. We also introduced in this release the cloud build service. So prior to this, we had two different build services. There was a cloud one and one that you could install on-prem. Now we've consolidated all our engineering into a single cloud build service for building custom apps on top of VertiGIS Studio Mobile. Web 5.23 came out same date. A couple of the high-level features here were point symbolization and resymbolization and a layer list filter that you've been waiting for. And Workflow 5.33 came out May 3rd. We've been doing an absolute ton of work on Workflow, a lot of quality of life improvements, making it easier to drag activities around, drag them on top of existing transitions to connect them, all kinds of stuff. This particular release introduced some requested features around log levels. So when you're building more complicated workflows, you often want a bunch of logging information in there, and then you want to kind of be able to disable it all at once, and logging levels will allow you to do that, as well as an activity pack interface. And I'm actually going to show this to you because I think it is definitely worth seeing. So here I am in VertiGIS Studio Workflow, and we've had activity packs in Workflow for a while. They are posted on a GitHub repository, but previously, if you wanted to take advantage of them, you needed to go to GitHub, you needed to download something, you need to create an item in your portal, paste in some URLs. It wasn't that it was hard, but it was several manual steps. We thought, hey, you know what? We can do way better than that. So let me just show you an example of what we provided, because I know you're not always on the latest version. You can see here, I've got a utility network helper. Where did that come from? Well, that came from this new activity packs panel. So if I uninstall that for a moment, you can see it's no longer in my activity packs. And if I say, hey, that sounds really useful, I'd kind of like that. Literally with just the click of a button, we do everything else for you behind the scenes, create the item, wire it in, bring it directly into your interface. One other quick example. You can see right now I don't have any CityWorks activities, but we do have a CityWorks activity pack. Hey, what if I want that one in there as well? Well, click the install button, you can see the version, you can see that it's installed, and you can see those activities come in. So this makes it way, way easier both to install and uninstall activity packs and workflow, as well as to see whether you've got the current version. Another part of this interface, if there's a newer version available, will actually give you the option to upgrade. So fantastic. Love this stuff, makes it so much easier to use. And that was that. All right, so what are we finalizing right now? These are things that are very much in QA, nearing completion to be released in the very near future. The very first thing I actually want to talk about is GeoCortex Essentials. So I know many of you are still using GeoCortex Essentials and GeoCortex Viewer for HTML5. You've been asking about the upcoming maintenance release. It is in QA now. It will be available in June. And just a couple of things I wanted to call out. The first one is the current version that you're working with, if you're on the latest version, is 4.14.5. The next one could easily have been called 4.14.6, but we actually changed it and called it 4.15. Why did we do that? Well, we've got this lifecycle calendar on our support center that shows, as you can see on the right, the latest version that's been released, but we don't include the third number in that. And some of you were asking, hey, wait a minute, you know, Cam's been saying in those road ahead webinars that you support this for 5 years from each release. Could you just represent that to give us peace of mind? So in the next release, it will be 4.15, and you will see its GA date as well as a retirement date, which will be 5 years in the future. So that gives you confidence that as long as you need to continue to run GeoCortex Essentials and the GeoCortex Viewer for HTML5, we've got you covered. Just also as a reminder, just about the Esri JavaScript API 3.x version, we did update this version of GeoCortex Essentials to the latest JavaScript API, which is 3.43. Some important security fixes in there. Unfortunately, there was also a bug in there where it broke asynchronous arcade scripts. We went back and forth and discussed it and basically said, you know what, the security fixes are more important than the asynchronous arcade scripts. If you are someone who is using those asynchronous arcade scripts, there are mechanisms for you to back down what version of the Esri JavaScript API you're using. So if you need a hand with that, contact us on the forum or in support, and we'd be happy to help you. And just a reminder that Esri JavaScript API 3.x is headed toward retirement mid-2024. All right, let's talk about mobile. A couple of things that are coming out shortly in VertiGIS Studio Mobile. These will be released in June. The very final tweaks to the version 2 of the app selector interface. I think this is our third iteration now. You guys have given us fantastic feedback. We really do love it when you give us feedback, when you ask questions, when you send us notes. It's super helpful. So we've incorporated that feedback. One of the things we did there was your kind of recently used apps are now kind of very first in that list, making them super easy to get at. And when you come to this next version of mobile, that is now going to be the only version of App Selector. After 3 iterations and the feedback, we're pretty satisfied with it. We've also done some changes in this version around improvements to the naming of related records in the UI. A couple of you with eagle eyes pointed out, you know, you really should be using the destination table for the name rather than the relationship table, because what you want to see is, say, fire hydrants rather than water lines to fire hydrants. So that is also a change that is coming in this next version of mobile. let's talk about analytics. We've been working on an update to analytics for a few months now, and it is in QA and getting very close to release. We're very excited. What is coming? Two really big features, of course, some small fixes as well, but the two really big features are filter controls on panel views. I'm going to show you a little video and talk to it around this, as well as the alarm subsystem. But today, when you saw those charts, it's like, hey, that's really interesting, but I want to start asking questions like, what is this? And can you give me more information on how does this actually work? And then similarly, the alarm subsystem, which I know many of you have been eagerly anticipating, will make its debut in this version of analytics, both the display of alarms within the interface and as well as the configuration. So let's start with filters. When you think about filters, that actually is the alarms. Is it? No, it's not. It's filters. So here we are. We want to look at some data. We're going to pull up 14 days of data, and we look at our chart and we go, okay, that's really interesting, but that big red bar is just clobbering everything that's related to a layer. So this is where you want to start to slice and dice and filter your data. So you would add a little filter and you would say, you know, I really don't think I want to see the layer data right now. Let's just get that out of my view so that I can see the rest of the information on the screen in front of me. So removing layers, that really helps with the data. But there's a whole lot more really to this. And you start to also in this filter tab do things like grouping. So keeping in mind, I still have that filter applied. I start to group my data and I want to see, well, okay, wait a minute. How is this coming from? This is public users, authenticated users, what's going on? And I can see I've got quite a lot of my data is public. So I'm actually going to add a second filter and I'm going to restrict my data to only show me public data. So now that I've confirmed on this part of the graph that that's what I'm looking at, now I'm going to go back and change how I'm grouping my data to get more insight into how that is actually set up. So now I know I'm not looking at layers and I'm only looking at public data, and I can begin to see how that is being used. So that is an example of the table filtering and chart filtering functionality. I also wanted to show you a preview of alarms within VertiGIS Studio Analytics. So let's have a look at this. You can see here on the left, I have an alarm and I'm going to drill in. I can see that this alarm is related to memory usage, kind of when it happened. But one of the things you often want is to know when that alarm was. So you can see there's a new trends chart that shows you when alarms were active. By filtering it down today, I can see when that alarm started, what time it began, what time it ended. And now, just kind of as an alternate example, we're going to go to ArcGIS Online and look a little bit at alarm configuration information. We're going to have a look at credits remaining, and we're going to add first a kind of warning level. When my credits get below a certain value, I'd like the system to warn me, as well as an actual error. If they drop below this critical threshold, I would like an actual error, please. And those are going to obviously work together to monitor my credit usage in analytics. So if you've been waiting for that, I'm pleased to tell you that it is coming soon. We're expecting a release next month. This month, it's June. Cam, it's June this month. So you can look forward to seeing that soon. Let's talk about things that are nearly out in VertiGIS Studio Web. The next release has a few really big things in it for you. We've completely revamped the tabular import experience. So this is like CSV, Excel, shapefile data that you're adding from file. Your feedback was, it's good, but you have to have the data in a very specific format. It would be great if we had more of a wizard-like experience that we're used to from the previous product, GeoCortex VR for HTML5. So we've got that figured out for you. Project sharing and collaboration, brand new component. I know many of you have been waiting for is there, and you're also going to see the initial release of the query tool filter tool. Now I'm going to demo two of these for you, the tabular import and the project sharing. So let's have a look at those. So here I am in the design portion of this, and we'll kick it off with tabular sharing and import data. So let's look at an actual view. Here I am in my layers. You'll see there are some new commands if you're looking at the default template, and of course you can go and grab this from the default template. I have a guided process now. Now I can do drag and drop, or I can bring things in directly. One of the things that we changed a little while back is the ability to actually deal with multiple files at the same time. So if you actually have to bring in multiple things at the same time, you can absolutely do that. I am not going to do that. In fact, instead, I'm going to show you the other part of this, which is more drag and drop. So downloads, let's go find our file. So we also support now a drag and drop, so we can do it this way as well. And let me walk you through the new wizard. So this is all brand new stuff. It should look very familiar to you if you're familiar with GeoCorrect Sphere for HTML5. Got a little bit of a tabular preview, so you can actually see what's going on. Some switches to whether you want to use the header row, what coordinate system you're in. Do I need a primary key? Should I generate a primary key? It will generally figure most of this out for you. So I'm actually not going to make any changes to this. I'm just going to go ahead and accept what it's showing me. And I see I've got some building footprints. Okay, I don't really love that, so let's just call it footprints. For my title of my layer, it's giving me actual use as a feature title and full address as a feature description. Some settings about whether I want this to participate in identify, query, and search. Let's accept these, say, yep, that looks good to me. Oh, a little bit more work here for me. I'd like to make this kind of a burnt orange color for the line, and we'll make the fill a yellowy color. I'm choosing very pleasing things, as you can tell. And then it is going to go ahead and actually bring that data in. I can see my title here. I have access to change the layer style from what I had previously done, as well as access to reconfigure the layer. So maybe I really don't love when I actually try this out and I click on this, I see the usage here and the address here, and I go, yeah, it's okay, but it's not exactly what I want. I can go back and reconfigure that. So let's go ahead and do that. And we're actually going to put the full address into the title, and usage is, it will happily take your spelling mistakes. And usage is our actual use. Save that. That's now obviously immediately applied. And if I do this again, I now have my address up here and my usage there, which in this case didn't work. So maybe I made a mistake, but it did work when I tried it before the webinar. So you just have to take my word for it. The other thing you've got in this is the new project sharing collaboration component. From a component point of view, it's pretty straightforward. You decide where it lives inside your layout, and then you pre-configure this with a brand new service, which is a shared storage service. I'm not going to open it because it's got details in it that I don't want you to see. That's my own stuff, but this is backed by Amazon S3 buckets, and I'll give you some more information on that in just a moment. So this is kind of the layout side. You can see if I open this up here, there are a number of different projects, saved projects, shared projects that have been stored that I have access to, but I'd like to show it to you in the context of the end user's view. So here I am. If I click on one of these projects, the default action is to load. Of course, just like uploading your JSON file today, it will then apply that state, including markup, measurement, selected layers, and the like. Similarly, if I go to another saved project over here around the legislature, you can see measurement, text, and other things that I put on, and another example around our office on Wharf Street. So those are all examples that change the state of my application, keeping in mind that you're actually completely replacing, it happens quickly, but you're completely replacing the state of your app. So when I clicked on this, hey, my user uploaded data, it isn't there anymore because I've actually replaced what was there with what has been previously saved. Now, we've done a few things, and just a huge shout out, you'll see this on the next slide, but thanks to everyone who took the time to review requirements with me. I got on a call with several of you and walked you through and got your input, and it was super valuable. One of the things that's never been there before that you asked for was, hey, can you show me kind of the most recently updated thing? And then the way this works behind the scenes is most of the options you would expect are here. I can create a brand new project. I can upload an existing project file to create something in here. I can see things, you know, where did this project came from? Who's the owner? When was it created? When was it modified? This one's owned by me. And of course, often what you're doing is filtering these down. So if you're interested in just your own, you can do that. If you're interested in just things that are shared, you can do that. So we've taken these and given you all the different types, projects that I can actually contribute to, projects that are read-only, and then of course you can control sort order of those results that come back. When you get into the projects themselves, you've got actions, so I can share, create sharing links, I can download this, I can control some of the settings around the name, the description, the public sharing URL. I can add certain people in groups. Who do I want to share this with from my portal organization? And I can mark this as read-only or my own. So we've given you pretty much everything you've asked for. The tricky part of this and the really exciting part of this is it's done in a very different way behind the scenes. So that's where we're going to go next. So yeah, big thank you to those who helped. This feature behind the scenes uses Amazon S3, simple storage service, compatible storage. We're actually going to give you some recommendations of simple, easy to use, both on-prem and cloud-based services that we tested with and tried out. Why did we use Amazon S3? Well, it was in conversation with you as our customers. You made it clear that the ease of collaboration and sharing, kind of that whole interface, was really the important part. You were hesitant to require a creator user type just to save a project, which would have been required had we done it inside the Esri portal. So what does this mean? It does have one big implication to you, and I want to review that quickly, and that is while we can help with authentication, controlling who has access to saved projects in general, we have no control in this model over authorization. So think of it like building security. You can control who comes into the building, but once they're in the building, in theory, every single user has access to every single project. Now, we've used information hiding, client side, to remove the logical options that you don't want access to. So if I created a project, I'm presented with an option to delete it, for example. If I didn't create that project, I'm not presented with an option to delete it. So from a user interface and protecting your users from careless mistakes, we've done everything we possibly can. But anyone who can create a project actually does have access to that entire bucket. So we're thinking through. You're welcome to ask more questions about this as you get started with this particular feature. A few last bits and pieces. Let's talk about the future. What's coming? Well, one of the things that is coming is a future release of mobile that is based on ArcGIS Maps SDK for .NET 200. This is part of our ongoing commitment to you as customers to ensure that you're always on the latest Esri technology as painlessly as possible. We've been working on this for a little bit now, but at this point, the entire team is now working on remaining tasks. There's quite a bit left to do for us. It'll be super easy from your point of view, but it took a lot of work on our point of view. Lots of benefits here. Better performance is an obvious one from our benchmarking on our internal in-progress work. There really are some significant performance gains, which we're excited about, but it's also going to give us access to new capabilities, for example, offline utility network traces. What's coming in web? I know this is a view that is always appreciated. You can see on the right-hand side some of the things that we've already talked about, including a small feature down in the bottom right-hand corner. A few of you are trying to make things work with cross-org ArcGIS Online collaboration sharing. We do have something in this release that will enable that for you. So if that's of interest, by all means, check out the release notes for those details. And what are we working on today that you won't see in the very next release in June, but you will see in a future release? The one-to-one data linking feature. So most of you, when you're using data linking, use it into one-to-many. You've kind of got a related table and a whole bunch of records. but every once in a while, there are some really good use cases for being able to go out and talk to related data where there's only one related record, and to just bring that data in, make it look like it's feature attributes on the feature of origin. So that's coming. We've got some work around drawing palette, preset config. We've got some additional work. We're obviously releasing a first version of the query tool filter tool, but a couple things that are still coming are the ability to save a query and then create a little mini form for the end user so that they just enter a couple of missing values, and then magically the saved query has what it needs and goes ahead to execute. So you can hide an awful lot of complexity from your end users and still let them do some pretty powerful stuff. So we know you'll be excited about that, as well as some work on the advanced query toolbox. So there's an advanced query interface in this new query feature. And today, if you know what you're doing, you can do all kinds of wonderful things there, but a toolbox that kind of gives you some common expressions, field names that are available, things like that, and kind of just inserts them for you, I think you will find will be much appreciated. And we're also working on some more display options for tabs and buttons, and some new patterns around embedded apps and authentication. So lots still to come. What does that look like in a release calendar? It looks like this. So you can see perhaps GeoCortex Essentials maintenance release in June. You're getting an updated version of analytics, probably pretty close to the end of the month, but also in June. Reporting and printing have small updates coming. Web and mobile next versions, which we just talked about, are coming in June. And you've also got an updated version of Inline and a new version of VertiGIS Studio Search with some improvements coming in June. So June is an action-packed month as far as releases go. With that, a few minutes over time, but definitely some interesting things for discussion. I actually block time out of my calendar for Road Ahead webinar. I love it when you send me questions. Often there are questions directly in the webinar itself. Sometimes you send them to me by email. I try really hard to get those answered back to you within 24 hours. So by all means, reach out. Love to hear your feedback. I know you guys are busy, you got lots on your plates. I really appreciate you taking the time to spend with me and learn more about VertiGIS Studio and other product lines in VertiGIS and what is coming your way. So with that, I will say farewell, thank you, and we'll see you all either at the Esri UC or in a couple of months at the next Road Ahead webinar. Take care.